What's going on today? I want to talk about the absolute simplest camera that I've ever used, the paper shoot camera. And so this is it. It's essentially supposed to be a modern digital replacement for a typical film disposable camera. And honestly, it does that pretty well, but there is one big catch that we'll get into at the end. So of course, the first thing you're gonna notice when you take a look at this is its really unique shape and design. I'd say it's about the size of a standard wallet, and like the name says, this is legitimately made out of paper. Now to be fair, it's kind of like a thick, cardboardy, hard type of paper, and the quality is pretty good. But again, the entire casing of this camera around the electronics is just paper, so this should not be anywhere touching any type of moisture or water. Not only is the outside casing made out of paper, the electronics are just fully visible, they're fully, accessible. So any liquid, any moisture, any dust, sand, anything like that can of course touch any of the electronics inside of there, and of course, it'll get to the paper as well. But also on that note, I personally have this red leather case, which I think it looks really good. It looks kind of vintage, but Papershoot sells a ton of different cases, and you can get replacement cases for the camera that you already have. So whether you just want different looks, or if you actually do damage the paper case, they do sell a ton of different cases and a ton of really cool designs on them as well. All right, now it's time to get into using this and of course the pros and cons of the Papershoot camera. So first off, like I said, this is the simplest camera I've ever used. You don't have to worry about anything. There's literally one button, it's the shutter button. There's not even a power switch on this. Although there is one switch on the back to change the filters, but I'll talk about that in just a second. And so because there's no screens and there's just that one shutter button, you don't have to think about anything. Like, you don't have to think about ISO, shutter speed, settings, aperture, file formats, anything like that. All you have to do is put in an SD card, put in 2 AAA batteries, and press the shutter button, and you're taking pictures. And so besides the shutter button up front, there's also USB-C on the side here, so you can transfer photos to your computer or phone or whatever, or of course through the SD card, which is right above that. On the other side here, there's just a little port for a remote trigger. And then on the back, you have this switch like I said earlier. So there's 4 different positions on this, and this basically cycles through the 4 different filter modes. So for the filter options, you of course have standard, and then you have monochrome, you have kind of a warmer tone, and then a cooler tone. But really, any photo out of this camera with any of these filters is gonna give you that vintage, old, disposable camera point and shoot style. And that's pretty much what you're gonna get out of this camera, and kind of what you get this camera for. So it does have an 18 megapixel sensor, but that really doesn't matter. The image quality, the sharpness, none of that really matters at all with this camera. You don't buy this camera for any of the specs. This is the type of camera and the type of look you go for, to get that specific look, to capture moments in your life, to make things look organic and raw and natural. Again, like, this is kind of meant to be a digital modern replacement for these disposable film cameras, where you look at these pictures and they're obviously not great quality by any means, but they just have this intriguing look to them that's kind of nostalgic that a lot of people, especially nowadays, are really trying to lean into more. But either way, I want to get into some of the cons of this now, because I'm sure at this point, if this is the type of camera you want or not. If you're just looking for a good all-around camera that's like an upgrade from your cell phone, this really is not the camera for you, and there are a lot better options at this price point. But now let's get into some of the cons of this, and of course, the biggest catch, which is the price point of this camera. So first of all, there's no screen on this camera at all. You can't see your pictures until you import them onto your computer. But when it comes to framing your shot, you do get this little cutout right here. It's just this little rectangle cutout that you can look through as kind of a viewfinder. But I find it's not really that good at actually figuring out your framing, and also figuring out, if your photo's level or not. A lot of times it would just happen to be a little bit off level, and the image wouldn't turn out as good as I hoped it would. Now, also something to bring up, there is a few second delay between hitting the shutter button and then taking the picture you want. Every once in a while, it would be just too long to where I'd miss what I was trying to get a picture of. Sometimes it's a little longer, sometimes it's a little shorter, maybe if it struggles to get auto exposure. Also, this is kind of annoying. There's no tripod thread at the bottom, so you can't mount this to a tripod. You just kind of have to handhold it, or you can use a camera strap, which they make attachments for as well. All right, last but not least, really the biggest con to this camera, and the biggest reason why it's hard to recommend this camera, is the price point. So this camera starts out at about $150, and that's just starting out. Once you start to get attachments and accessories, once you start to get, different cases for this or different designs on the cases, the price is of course gonna go up from there. You know, everything about this camera is kind of cool, but when you think about spending $150 for this camera that, you know, really isn't even close to the quality of your cell phone. You know, I'm not even saying that these have the same use cases. You know, iPhones give good quality, high resolution photos. This isn't designed to do that, but you can get apps, you know, you can put filters on your photos to get a similar-ish look to this on the phone that you already have without having to spend $150 extra. I think that for 99% of people, that's just too much money for what this camera offers. You know, of course, there's gonna be that perfect demographic where, you know, this camera is perfect and at the perfect price point and does the perfect things for you. And if that's the case, I mean, this camera's awesome. You know, it's pretty durable. It's lasted a lot longer than I thought it would and still looks pretty much perfect. But I just can't really recommend 99% of people spending $150 on this when you can do really similar type of stuff with your phone. Or if you just want a good quality dedicated camera, you can get a pretty good DSLR or mirrorless camera for $150 as well that you can grow into, you can learn a lot more about photography with. But let me know what you think down in the comments. Would you buy this camera for $150? Do you think it's worth it? Either way, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.